My problem wasn't the cancer, it was the aloneness. And if I long for anything in my life, it's connection. I'm trained as a psychologist, and I've done 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. And in all of my training, telling your own story is like a big no-no. The whole purpose of this is hopefully to help other people feel less alone in these complicated moments in our lives, where we all let go of all of that fear and bullshit and just exist together as our most authentic, flawed, gorgeous, fucked up selves. When we can be ourselves, we have the best and most perfect chance at connection. I'm Sarah Schmidt, and this is Wholey Schmidt, Season 1. Welcome back to Wholey Schmidt. I'm Sarah Schmidt, and I'm so glad you tuned in. Today we're going to talk about my experience of falling in love. I didn't expect to fall in love when I did, and my path to getting there was in no way conventional. As you may have heard in other episodes, I'm on my second marriage. Before marrying my now husband, I had an 18-year relationship with a wonderful woman named Wholey. And although our marriage has formally ended, our relationship continues to unfold as we co-parent 3 amazing humans today. I'm not someone who identifies with labels. I never have been. I've always just loved who I loved and have been fortunate to have the support of my family along the way. I know this isn't the case for everyone. I fundamentally believe that there is no right or wrong way to be in relationship with someone. And we continue to bust through societal norms about how relationships should work. The traditional path looking like courtship, engagement, marriage, and staying with that one partner until we die. It doesn't work for everyone. As it turns out, this cookie cutter view of relationships isn't very realistic for most people, and it certainly wasn't realistic for me. Today, we're going to explore the nuance and gray space within relationships beyond the bounds of tradition. My hope for you is that you can remove any shame, stigma, or sense of failure around how your relationship landscape looks. Maybe you will hear some of your own experience in my words. Maybe it will make you think about someone you love. I believe we have an opportunity. It's time to embrace the spectrum of love and how relationships unfold. And so with that, on to my chapter with Wholey. I actually think that for about 15 years after I lived thinking I was going to die, I couldn't imagine myself past 40. It wasn't like troubling to me. It just wasn't available to me to imagine. And when it came time to graduate and move on to a job, all I thought about is, I can't go home. I need to stay close to these doctors who are keeping me alive. Cancer mysteriously sprung upon me. I had no idea it was happening. I didn't understand why I got it. And then miraculously, they tell you months later you're cured. And you're like, how do you know for sure? Because I didn't know I had it. How do you know I don't? And my 21-year-old brain just that's how it existed, in this sense of how do you know for sure? Thinking about what are you going to do? Everything was just very tainted by that. I was really involved in some of the campus ministry stuff that was going on campus. All of a sudden, I could talk about my experience. I could share it. I felt safe doing that. I felt some support in this group. I found out that there was a local Catholic high school that was hiring a big crop of teachers. And I thought, this is great. I can do something that I am familiar with, I know I'm good at, and I can stay close to all my doctors. So I applied for this job. And I got it. So I was hired as a campus minister at a Jesuit high school outside of Chicago. My job was to help welcome and transmute all the service work and retreat stuff and all the cool social justice work that was going on, make it applicable to a big group of girls that were making this institution now co-ed. I was also part of a crop of new teachers. So I had this instant group of younger people. We were all going through the same thing, all learning the ropes, all teaching, all young, all single. So I had a bit of a social life. It was just really a great period of time. My first 2 years of college, I think I was very interested in the idea of dating, but I was so consumed by just like keeping my head above water that I had a lot of good friendships with men and women, and I just really enjoyed those, but none of them became romantic. I just was really worried about not doing well and studying and just like trying to figure it all out. And I didn't do any of that with ease. It all felt like it took a ton of effort. I certainly met people that I thought, oh, that would, be interesting, but I was very awkward, and so my junior year, I dated a little for the diagnosis, but after and in my senior year, there was no way I was going to date anybody. I mean, I certainly had the opportunity, but I didn't want to touch myself and like physically close to myself. There were like 11 inches of scars on my body, or 12 maybe. My skin was burned from the radiation, and it stayed this like very crazy burned color for a really long time. I lost all the hair on the back of my head, and I wore a baseball cap constantly just to cover it. And I was so embarrassed by it, or just cognizant of it all the time. I lost a ton of weight, and I was like really skinny. And while people constantly complimented me at how skinny and thin I was, I felt horrible, like physically. I had no energy. I just was exhausted and pale, except for the burned skin. I mean, it just was not like, it wasn't going to date. It just wasn't going to happen. And it's not even like I missed it or even was aware of it. I just was trying to survive. I got to graduate. I'm a senior. I've got to get this done. I've got to stay alive. Dating was like my last thing on my mind. So a couple of new teachers and I noticed a kind of pattern in the young women who came from this high school that closed to merge with this other school. And we were really concerned about their mental health. They were struggling so much. I mean, their school closed. They were in this much bigger school. There was a lot of tumult about this school going co-ed, and there was a lot of hostility, and the girls felt it, and the boys were struggling with the transition. It was a really tough time. And we identified this pattern and this, like what we saw. By we, I mean a couple of the new teachers. And we thought, God, maybe we could do something about it. So we had this idea that we would create like a 6-week program for girls. We called it the Women's Leadership Seminar. We pulled together juniors, a small group of them, maybe there were 20, and we took them through like a curriculum that we designed ourselves, where each week we touched on a different topic. We talked about like relationships and media and health, and we did some team building stuff with them. And the goal was to help them just feel welcome and like they had a place where they could talk about things that they were struggling with. And it was just like a wild success. And we had so much fun doing it. It was probably about 2 years of working together. One of the women that I was working with on this project, and on a couple other things too, one day she came to me and she said, I think I have feelings for you. It's a moment I just won't forget, because I knew in that moment that I did too, but I had never thought about it before. I had never dated women. I never was cognizant of being attracted to women, but there she was telling me this, and I knew my soul that I felt the same way. And I don't know, within like 3 days, I was ready to come out to everybody I knew. It was just this kind of a scene in the movies where somebody's life flashes, like the scene backs up to when they were an infant. And, it was like one of those where everything just coalesced in this moment of yes. Something just like really touched me, and I just knew that we were supposed to be together. I don't really remember being fearful at all early on. That came later when I kind of settled in, to like the reality of what life actually as a lesbian couple, what that meant in the world. But for a good chunk of time, I just felt really settled, like it was right. I started telling people right away. It totally freaked her out, I think. I told my mother, I told my father, I told my siblings, I told friends, I told people at work, which was probably not the right thing to do initially. I didn't really think about the religious piece of it at all. The Catholic in me didn't have any problem reconciling this. There was no issue for me in that. When like building a life and the challenges of that hit us, that I think we came across fear. My just like jumping in like with both feet was a little surprising and sometimes hard for her because I was like all in. I'm just the kind of person that when I make a decision, I am all in that decision until I'm not anymore. I don't really know how to dip my toe in the water. When I feel like something is right, I just want to go for it. And I went for it. And I think that was a little scary, but also reassuring for her. And so it was a both and. I think everything's a both and. There's a lot of gray, a lot of ambiguity in this. I think the fear set in when we tried to imagine like working together at the same school that happened to be a Catholic school and trying to build a relationship, and were we going to keep it secret? Were we going to tell students? How did the faculty feel? All this kind of stuff. That became really hard and very, very messy. And in a very ungraceful way, I quit my job the first day of that next school year. I showed up the teacher, orientation meeting. I had what I would only deem a panic attack when I sat there realizing that I was now part of this couple and this is how this institution felt about us. And I was supposed to do the work I was doing, which was very vulnerable and real and transparent. I couldn't hide. It just wasn't in me to hide. I didn't know how to hide. I've never known how to hide. I mean, I have flaming red hair. You don't hide when you have red hair and you're 5'10". I couldn't do it. And I quit that day. It was a hard day because I felt really, was letting people down. But I knew that if I didn't do it, I'd let myself down. I didn't think we'd have a shot at being together if I stayed. I was in a bit of a tailspin for a little while. But I quickly just decided I would go to graduate school because, I think graduate school is a great way to buy time. You can look super productive and like you're on this path to achieve something that everyone deems very meaningful, but not have a fucking clue what you're doing. And that was a great backstop for me. My parents both knew her and had gotten to know her. And so they were funny. My mom would tell everybody, well, Sarah's with Julie and, she just might be the kind of person that just can love anybody and she loves Julie. None of them could say like, Sarah's a lesbian. And I just let it ride. I wasn't going to try to push it because honestly, I really hate labels and I always have. And you put me in a box and I'm going to try to figure out a way to bust out of it. The idea that I had to pick a label for myself just because I fell in love with this human was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I mean, eventually I just did and I accepted it because it was just easier than constantly being like, I'm this or I'm that or I'm not this. I mean, it just was too much explanation and the world sometimes just needs us to like embrace simple categories. Ellen hadn't come out on TV yet, right? There was no Kiss on her show. Melissa Etheridge hadn't been on the cover of Time magazine. There was nothing out there, like even in the media really, that showed lesbian couples in their humanity. It was all like just weird, flashy television. We were really, I don't want to say trailblazers, but in some ways we kind of were. I mean, we're not the trailblazers from the 50s, but still in the 90s, there was a lot going on. Like there were no civil unions. There was no relationship recognition. In most states, you could not adopt. It was still illegal. I mean, there were still sodomy laws on the books in many states in this country at that time, right? Let's not forget that we were like coming into the George Bush era where, thanks to Karl Rove, he got a second term by demonizing homosexuality. That was the rallying cry for that campaign. So we were in that climate. And I have to say, given all of that, my parents were amazing. I know it was hard for my dad. And I only know that because he would just bring up random shit to like get on me about. Like I bought a mattress. It was too expensive. I decided to buy a couch. I should never have done that. I could have had the old couch from home. And I knew what he was trying to say to me is like, I don't feel good about this. I'm worried about you. I'm not sure about your decision making. I'm stressing about this. I'm anxious about it. And he didn't want to say that. I give him like a lot of props for picking on those silly things that we argued about. And I think that was his way of processing what was going on. Probably a lot of grief too, because I don't think he imagined then that I would have children and would there really be a wedding? And did he have a fantasy about giving me away? I don't know any of that, but I got to give him a lot of credit. And my mom, they were really by my side. And actually my extended family was this huge family that I'm a part of. I got nothing but support. When Julie and I married, my uncles, who were in their mid 80s at the time, who are just like more Catholic than Catholic can be, were in the front row of the church and the first to stand and applaud at the end of our ceremony. I mean, it was remarkable. I enjoyed this incredible level of support and a sense of safety in my family, which I knew from all of my friends and their experiences was just something I should just like hold on to and treasure, because a lot of our friends were not getting that from their families. It made all the other things that we were dealing with easier. And it also allowed us to do some things and take some risks that some of our friends couldn't do for a while. It just wasn't as easy. So we started thinking about parenting. We started thinking about buying a house. Well, we thought about the house before the parenting, but like trying to figure out ways to protect our relationship. We got really involved in politics, and could we influence the political scene and bring like some relationship recognition to people? And we were really super involved in that. And I'm quite convinced that we did that all because we had the support of our families. And from that place, you really feel like you can take big risks. I think like as human beings, we crave like affirmation, confirmation, support about everything. Our choice in partner is like a small piece of it. And it's gotten like so blown out because of all these, just the level of intolerance that I think exists in the world, right? Making it so hard if you don't follow this one path that we're all supposed to be on. Find a person of the opposite sex, you get married, and then you have 2.3 kids, and you live in the suburbs, and you get a white picket fence, and you have a dog, and maybe a cat, and 2 goldfish, and everybody goes to college and gets good jobs, and then they vacation together, on the lake. When someone veers from that, I think, whatever that is, or however that is, I mean, there's just not a lot of tolerance in our world for difference. I have talked to so many people who struggle, particularly around their partner, and whether they identify as gay or bisexual or transgender, they struggle with getting the support they need. And I've had the chance to talk about this a few times. I think the biggest thing that I've wanted to say or communicate is, are you going to support yourself? Are you going to stand up for yourself? In the face of whatever it is that you're getting, whether it's criticism or concern or, outright just people shutting you out of their lives, how do you want to support yourself? How do you want to stand up for yourself? Because I think the loss that comes from not standing up for who you are is much greater than the loss of losing a loved one and staying silent. That's just my belief. I'm sure there'll be people who want to debate me on this, but if we aren't standing up for ourselves, then who will? And I, fortunately, had people who stood up for me and were willing to kind of model that for me and give me the freedom then to do it for myself and others. I'll never forget the time the priest at some mass started talking about homosexuality and how evil it was and was hinting at it, and maybe it was really overt. I don't know for sure, but my mom told me about how after the mass, my dad cornered him in the sacristy and was like, that has to be the last time you talk about that. That was ridiculous. It's wrong. It's not fair. My daughter, this, that. He went to bat for me. And he did that over and over and over again. And so that gave me this sense of I can take these risks because I have people in my corner. Finding people who sit in your corner is I think one of the most important things. And I think for some people, you got to get beyond how you're related to them. I have people in my corner who I share no biological connection to, and their support is allowing me to do things that I never thought I could do. Jumping off a fucking cliff. We had that as a couple. It allowed us to do really, really hard things. Because parenting is not easy. I don't care what your family configuration is. It is the hardest thing you're going to do. And our parenting journey was extra hard. And so having not only their support, But then that sense of like, I can do this for me too was humongous. Because if I can do it for myself, then I can help my kids. I can do it for my kids. I can show them how to do it for themselves. This chain reaction of really, really healing. I loved the trail that we were blazing as a couple. So I had this idea in my head I wasn't going to live past 40. And I really couldn't get beyond it, right? And I just kind of, wasn't like something I thought about all the time, but I just really couldn't visualize. I couldn't see myself older than 40. Everything just stopped. I could not get beyond it. And then I hit about 38 and I went, oh, fuck. Like, I'm going to live past 40. And I looked around and I looked at myself and I really didn't like what I saw. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. I despised the physical me. If I could have cut off my head and just walked around with it on a stick and like eliminated my physical body, I would have done it, I think, because I just hated everything about it. There was nothing redeeming. And I treated it like that. I hated it. And I literally hated on it. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was like really overweight. I wasn't exercising. I used food as a soothing mechanism to try to make everything feel better. And I made not great choices. And I wasn't very healthy. I was setting a poor example for my children. And we were about to get married because civil unions had been legalized in Iowa and then Illinois. And so we decided to have a civil union and there were going to be 220 people there. And you have to hire a photographer for a wedding. And I didn't want to hire a photographer. I did not want anybody there to take pictures. And I was like so sad about that because our kids were so excited about this wedding. I mean, what little kids don't love a wedding? And what little kids get to be there for their mom's wedding? I literally woke up like one April morning. And I was like, that's it. We're done. That next day started changing everything about the way I was living. I started thinking about why I was eating and what I was eating and what I was doing and how I was moving. And I started trying to tune into how I felt when I did different things and how I took care of myself. I transformed my physical self. It took a while for, I think, my mental and emotional self to catch up. And when it did, I was a very different person. That was really hard. It was hard for me, but it was really hard on my relationship. Because how I felt and how I expressed myself and how I wanted to be and who I wanted to be with and all of that was up for question in me all of a sudden. And that was really, really unfair. And I couldn't do anything about it. And I started to really love me. The world just kind of became alive in ways that it wasn't before. And our relationship couldn't keep up with that. We had 18 really good years, and I'm really proud of them. And since that time, we've had nearly 10 really good years. These 10 look different than the first 18, but the constant thing throughout it, with a few blips, has been a respect for each other, a care for one another, a co-partnering relationship that's honored each other and our children. We've set an example for them of how to really love, truly love someone in different ways, what that can look like, what partnership looks like, and how it can shift and change. I mean, I've said this before to people. I think one of the things I'll probably, like if I died tomorrow, one of the things I'd be most proud of is the way we divorced and the life we've lived since then. And I love it that when we go to a parent-teacher conference, we have to tell people that we're divorced. They wouldn't guess it. For a long time, our kids were like, why are you guys divorced? Why can't you get back together? And you like each other so much. It was hard, but it was the alternative, would have been horrible, right? And I'm so deeply proud of that. And in the process of uncoupling consciously, I hurt her terribly. And I've tried really hard for the last decade, not to make up for it, because you can't, but to really honor her and the person she is and to just do my best. Model for my kids a form of partnership that I could only hope they could someday find. Separation really fucking sucks. And it's really, 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 really hard. But Julie and I are people who we do hard things. And nothing actually was ever easy. So I don't think we expected this one to be easy. And I also think from the very beginning of our separation, we had this like document that we created, which was a vision of how we wanted to co-parent. And we wrote it down and we signed it and we honored it. And it was really about putting our kids first and modeling for them how to manage, conflict and life and partnership and all these things. And we stuck to it. It wasn't simple, and there were a lot of really rocky moments, but our kids didn't see us arguing with each other. I mean, very little. They saw us backing each other up. They saw us defending one another's decisions. They saw us being generous with one another. They saw us being flexible with each other. And we were committed to it. Early on in the divorce, I had a really hard time. I was having a very hard time. And I remember writing down on a piece of paper 4 things that I loved about Julie. And I put them in my wallet because I recognized that the 4 things I fell in love with were still true about her. And I needed to remind myself in moments when it was hard and all the other bullshit and noise got in the way. I did little things like that. I really was committed and I made an effort and I worked really hard at it. And I went to therapy a lot. We got therapists for our kids and we worked on healing in like very overt and then covert ways. I spent a good chunk of time trying to do everything I possibly could to save our marriage. And I would have done anything, tried anything, and we did do a lot of things for a good chunk of time. I would have settled with, could we be 10% happier? Because I really felt like the worst thing that could happen would be divorce and then the kids and all that. I just was so worried about the kids and everything was about the kids. But there was a point when I just knew that there's nothing else I could do and that nothing I did made her feel better. So there was just a point where we knew that separation was our only option. And we were able to do that really efficiently and quickly. That was a gift because we minimized the amount of time that our family was under the stress of all of that ambiguity. We decided to tell the kids together. Our oldest was at college, and unfortunately, we had to do it over FaceTime, which was horrible. But she wasn't going to be home for a while, and we really felt like we needed her to know what was going on. And then the other 2 were younger. They were 6 and 8 and a half. After school one day, we sat them down on the couch, and we explained what was going on. It's the hardest thing. But our daughter, she didn't even let us finish the sentence. I mean, she knew. That was really telling to me. That I think they already knew. I have to give like an enormous amount of credit to Julie because she stuck to her word. Everything she did was in the service of the kids. Such her level of integrity was just unwavering. She made it easy for me to do the same and give my best effort. And we were able to come up with a schedule that was like really workable for the kids. And we chose that we were going to live like close together so that it was easy for the kids. And everything we did was in service of trying to take the best care we could of them. They didn't have to move to schools. One house was still familiar. The second house was close by, so it was like close to friends. And I mean, all those little things that I think like really matter. And we made it easy for them to transition back and forth. Like we did it together. They were with me, then they went to her. We didn't do it at school, avoiding contact with each other. We didn't force them to haul big backpacks wherever they went because they were going from one house to the other. We did that for them. We had this big, giant red tote bag I embroidered with their initials, and it was the bag that they would just throw everything they needed in, the stuffies or the retainers or whatever, the medicine or things like that had to go back and forth. And we called it the red bag. And, we joked that we should write a book, called The Red Bag about our story of like how we did it, because I think we did a really good job. This is hard, and it's really hard on families, and it's really hard on kids, but we minimized that as much as we could for them and for ourselves too. I think, by agreeing to like get along and support one another, we saved ourselves like an enormous amount of heartache just in conflict that didn't have to be part of things. We had worked so hard to fight for marriage publicly and on large stages in many states on the national scene, and had been involved in this fight for equal rights in big ways. And then we were divorcing. I carried a lot of shame around that and just disappointment in myself. And it didn't help that there were members of the LGBTQ community that were really, really critical and just not kind and not supportive, especially when I started dating men. And that was like a whole nother layer of difficult, because I already felt bad enough. I didn't need that layered on top of it. But it just illustrated, I think, the power of shame in marginalized communities and how it just is doesn't discriminate. Shame is infectious, right? That might have been one of the more difficult things. And my family loves Julie, and I felt like I had taken her away from them on some level. And that took a whole level of adjustment. And we've worked through that quite a bit. And my family adores her, and they're still close to her. And it's not the same, but it took me a long time to kind of be able to like hold my head up and show up at family events. And so I'm like the 37th grandchild on my dad's side. And I'm the first person in my family to come out. And I was also one of the first to get divorced. That was really hard. That was super hard for me, because I felt like I wasn't just representing myself or my family, but I was carrying like this weight of a community of people that I was flying the flag for, and I had let them all down. We had failed. We fucked it up. And, maybe that's what killed us in the end, because it was a lot of pressure. Parenting was very complicated. We had a lot of things going on. Our kids were struggling on a lot of levels. And it just was an added level of stress in our lives that made being there for each other really hard. At the end of the day, there's only so much you have to give. And if all of the oxygen is being sucked up by your children, what do you have left for your partner? And we were so good at taking care of them. And we really ran out of steam, I think, to take care of us. It's not a recipe for a healthy marriage. I don't think it should be taken lightly, but I don't know that we're meant to be partnered with one person for like 80 years. That is a really beautiful story if it can happen. My grandparents were married for 75 years and we're celebrating. That's amazing. And I'm so happy for them and you. But that might not be for everybody. And we've set up this ideal that you're going to spend the rest of your life with somebody, but now you might live to be 120. It's a really long time, and a lot can change. And if you're a human who's like seeking and growing and changing and looking for pushing yourself and striving to be and curious about the world, and like you just may not find one human that can be your person for the next, 80 years. And that's okay. I think that's okay. If it matters, Sarah Schmidt thinks that's okay. I guess it's so important to me that people think about like what you do today and how you treat people today is so much more important than like, we've been together 45 years. Well, maybe you've hated each other and you stayed together because you felt like you had to. I don't know that that's a great story to tell. divorce doesn't have to be the end of the world, and it doesn't have to be horribly laden with conflict. And the conflict doesn't have to last for years, and you don't have to traumatize your kids, and you actually can separate. Like, I think we've set up a dynamic in our world where divorce automatically, people think it means just balls to the wall conflict. I hate him. I hate her. Can we be conscious about our uncoupling so that we can walk away and yet still together with like dignity and our humanity? There should be a way to do that. You can quit your job and still be friends with people at work. You spend more time with them than you do your partner most weeks, I'm guessing. I just think there's an opportunity here as a culture look at it, and the litigation that's involved and all this stuff. I think we've made it very hard on couples. And then add to that the burden of like a couple that is financially has all kinds of hardships, or, trying to sustain two households, and just how hard it is to parent in general. We could really support families in different ways, create some different paradigms for what it means to be a family. My kids have this amazing blended family that's full of like 3 grandmas, extra siblings, dogs that come between households occasionally, appreciation for one another, the ability to celebrate holidays together, and really respect for one another and all of our new partners. I don't think that should be that unusual. I don't think it has to be that unusual. Because if you really think about, like, what do my kids really need? What does my community really need? What does this human that I was in partnership with really need? How can I honor my deepest, truest self? Then this is pretty easy. It's about kindness and a little bit of selflessness, a bunch of thoughtfulness, and being kind of easy with each other. And I'm not perfect at this all the time, but it is definitely, my goal. It's what I definitely strive for. As I watched this episode back, and I really thought about, what do I hope people gain from listening to this story? Like, why am I even telling it? It occurred to me that my real hope, my purpose in sharing this really intimate piece of my life was just to encourage people to think beyond the norms and the stereotypical ways that we have defined what relationship can mean. I think as humans, we are raised to hope that we will fall madly in love someday. But if you were to poll, 100 people, I think it would be very few who could say that it happened just exactly like how they expected it would. And one of my real intentions for telling this story is to invite you as a human being to be open to relationship and love and companionship and partnership in all its many forms, as a way to just be able to surround yourself with support throughout your life, through the many phases of your life and how you might need it and how it might need to unfold for you at different times. Our relationship was full of surprises from the beginning and lots of twists and turns. And I don't think that we would have been able to manage and survive and thrive, frankly, and build a family and inspire others if it hadn't been for the support that we allowed others to offer us. As a lesbian couple, we enjoyed a lot of support from our family and friends. And I fully recognize that that is not the case for most, probably, gay or lesbian couples, especially if we consider gay or lesbian couples around the world. And even with that, we struggled really significantly as parents and as partners to just try to do the right thing for everyone. I say that, I put it out there because I want people who are, entering into partnership or just starting families or struggling in the management of parenting and staying in partnership to just pause for a moment and hear me say that this is probably the hardest thing you're going to do. And I think if we just acknowledge that it's hard and let it be hard, we might just cut ourselves a little bit of slack and let go of all of the stereotypical images that the world has put out there about what this is supposed to look like. We can stop comparing ourselves to one another. We can stop imagining the perfect Instagram scenarios and just be in the difficult moments of relationship. It has been said to me so many times that your partner will be your greatest teacher. They will present to you the most important and the most difficult things that you need to learn. They will trigger you. They will be a mirror for you in ways that no other human being can. And if this isn't something that we're taught as little kids, when we're told to imagine, the perfect family that we're going to have someday. I had the fortune of seeing my parents really work at their marriage and struggle with it. And sometimes I think maybe they fought too hard for it. But that was the choice they made. And my mom was never shy about saying that marriage was hard. And that was kind of a gift for me because it allowed me to accept the hard moments as normal and not as something that was wrong with us. During my relationship with Julie, we experienced so much progress. Couples everywhere across the United States enjoyed relationship recognition in terms of civil unions and even gay marriage. We saw sodomy laws struck from the records of many states in America. More and more couples were able to adopt. We had courts that were willing to approve and engage with them in their adoption proceedings. But I think it's fair to say that that is shifting again. And there are real implications for this. Real humans living real lives, taking care of one another, and real children who stand to be hurt and their relationships threatened should some of these relationship protections disappear for them. With that, I really believe strongly that we need now, more than ever, to be steadfast in our support of humans who do not fit the stereotypical molds that the world would like us to be in. And we can't take for granted that anyone else is going to do this for them or for us. Homophobia, sexism, racism exists and has burdened a community of people with shame. And it has allowed another group to shame others. It's our job to be aware, to let it go, to heal from it. You might be a straight person walking around with a lot of shame around your own sexuality and your own sexual experiences. And you might be a gay person who is not all that supportive to your gay or transgender friends. If I can't let go of my own shame, it's going to be very difficult for me to stop shaming others. So my takeaway for you is this. And I want to say it's simple, but I actually know it's not. How can you start to let go of any shame around feeling that your relationship needs to look a certain way? Relationships are some of the biggest teachers and self-development opportunities in our lives, and they are all about our growth and self-actualization. If we can embrace that perspective and look at them as such, we take an enormous amount of pressure off of our relationships to be perfect from the beginning. So, have the relationships, be in the relationships that are going to serve you. Together, let's let go of comparing ourselves to the perfect Instagram marriage because it just isn't real. And let's start embracing the unique makeup of the way love unfolds in our lives. If any of this resonated with you, we'd love for you to join our community. Subscribe to get first access to next week's episode. I guarantee you it's going to be good. And follow us on Instagram to continue the conversation at Wholey Schmidt. WHOLEYSCHMIDT. And thanks.